everyone. Let me make sure that we are unmuted. Wonderful. We're so glad that all of you are here joining us. I say we are letting a few more people in. So we'll give it another minute or so, but hopefully all of you have something warm and cozy to drink and are enjoying indoors on this rather blustery day, at least where we are.
It's a beautiful day for a tea.
Yeah.
To be inside and cozy.
Yes. Apps could not agree more. So, let's see. Give it another minute or so, but then we'll be getting started right away.
You know what would make this more perfect?
What?
If right outside the window there was a sleigh with a horse.
It would be very nice if we had a sleigh outside. We have a cutout of the Santa outside, so that's similar. But unfortunately, no sleigh-driven or horse-pulled sleighs.
You know, and that is, I think, one of my favorite Lombard stories was it Peter Hoy?
Yes.
Yeah, but he would pick up the kids from school with a sleigh and with the horses and everything and take them home. That is just such a charming Lombard story.
It really is. So I said we'll go ahead and we will get started. So welcome everyone to our Victorian Christmas Tea. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rae and I am the Education and Collections Manager here at the Lombard Historical Society, and I'm joined by...
My name is Kim White, and I used to do this, but I'm so glad that Rae is doing this now because I'm doing a lot of other fun things, but it's nice that they invite me back from time to time.
Yes, and so today the tea that Kim and I are enjoying, which is the tea that was in the goodie bags if you purchased one, is the Twinings Chai. So this is a black tea with a lot of warming spices. It's got cardamom and cinnamon. And when I smell it, it just smells like Christmas in a cup to me.
It does.
And so that was part of the reason that I decided that was going to be the tea that we were drinking this afternoon. As well as we have a plethora of sweets and savories. We have our cucumber sandwiches, we have some meats and cheeses, as well as a plethora of tiny desserts. So I say, if you would like to have a few yourself, Kim.
Thank you very much.
We fully want you all to enjoy sips and sweets and savory little nibbles along with us. And so we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you. Yeah.
Talking about Christmases of the past. Now, for those of you who have never had the pleasure of meeting Kim in person, you may not know that she loves Christmas.
I love it very much.
It is her favorite time of year. And a lot of the traditions that you follow with your family, and maybe many of you, actually come from this Victorian era.
Absolutely. I have to thank Queen Victoria.
Yes, she did Christmas right.
You know, between Queen Victoria and Charles Dickens,
yes,
they really, you know, made the way we celebrate Christmas just absolutely fantastic, because really up until that point, it was considered a minor holiday.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people still even worked on that day. It wasn't really celebrated that much.
Yeah, it was, which is so strange to think of, you know, with the Christian holiday. You would think that celebrating the birth of the Savior would be a big holiday, but instead they just kind of let it, they noted it and let it pass. But one of the reasons that we see Christmas really gaining popularity, especially during this time, has to do with the Industrial Revolution and the emergence of a middle class. So we are currently sitting in the lovely Victorian Cottage, which would be a middle class home that was built in 1883. And during this time with industrialization, suddenly women laborers are not having to spend quite as much time doing very minute detail work. And so something that could take you, hours and hours or even days or, longer, you're now able to get done with a lot less time.
So we're having a little bit more free time.
Yes.
And we're having a little bit more money.
Correct. And so one thing that you can do with a brand new disposable income is buy presents and celebrate. So we really see, the Industrial Revolution has a big part to play in why we celebrate Christmas the way that we do. Now, do you get Christmas cards, Kim?
I do, not as many as I used to. And I have to admit that I think when I was much younger, I would have my list. But back then, I had something called an address book. And I would actually write down in it people's names and addresses. My mom and dad moved around so much that I put them in pencil. Everybody else was in pen, my parents were in pencil. But I enjoyed it, but now I'm just so busy. And the crazy thing is I'm busy, but that's kind of the way that Christmas cards started, was because somebody was so busy.
Exactly. So we actually can trace Christmas cards, unlike a lot of other Christmas traditions, back to a single individual. And we know definitively the origin story. So there was a gentleman named Henry Cole who would be able to sympathize with your plight.
Yes.
Because he had a stack of
And,
mail.
and back then, if you did, how you get mad if somebody doesn't reply to your text and how easy it is to reply to a text. Back then, if you got a letter in the mail, let's say it was a page and a half, you would be required to almost send them a letter back with just as much writing on it. Otherwise, it was considered poor taste and bad manners.
Exactly. And you didn't want to, and heaven forbid that you didn't send a letter back at all.
Oh,
Because that meant that your friendship relationship was in fact over, that you were giving them the snub. You never wanted to speak to them again.
but truly, if you were somebody who was, important in your town or in your community, you would know a lot of people and they would be writing you at Christmas time. So where you're just one person, you may have gotten 40, 50 letters.
Exactly. And that was the plight, as I said, what the situation Henry Cole found himself in. So the image that you're seeing on your screen right now, that is the very first Christmas card from 1848. And so he reached out to an artist friend and said, I have this entire stack of mail that I need to respond to. I'm not going to be able to respond to everyone with the same length that they've given me. And so he commissioned the artist whose name escapes me at the moment, but I know that you can find it.
Yeah.
It's,
Can't remember it right off.
I know. And so he commissioned, this very sweet holiday card with a group together, and it reads, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you." So very nice sentiment that we still see today. And it's just a way to let them know that he was in fact thinking of them. And probably there were some who felt a little snubbed. I'm not gonna lie.
They probably did, but there's probably a few more that went, hey, that's a pretty good idea.
Yes.
How can I get me some of those cards?
Yes, because the first Christmas cards, those are going to actually be postcards. And so we see that they would have the image on the front, you would have a little space for writing on the back, and then you would have space for the address to be able to send
But
it.
this would still be somewhat cost prohibitive because it wasn't done en masse.
No.
So you would almost have to pay for the artist and for the printing. So it's not going to be until a little bit later when printing costs and mailing costs make it more accessible.
Yes, it's really, we see when mail kind of drops down to about the penny postcard, that's where we see, postcards become more accessible and mailing in general. And it's going to take a little while though for the Christmas cards to actually make their way over here to the United States. It's not going to be until 1875 when a gentleman by the name of Louis Prang invents, or I should say prints, the Christmas cards here in America. And they're also very sweet. They have,
It's more mass produced.
yes,
At that point.
he does own Prang has a print shop, and so he's making them to sell kind of at those cent, price points.
Highly collectible too.
Yes, if you find yourself with a vintage Christmas card collection, especially some of those very early Louis Prang prints, they are well sought after for collectors these
So
days.
go through your grandmother's attic.
Yes. But these are still going to be those postcard styles. It's actually not going to be until 1915 that we get, the iconic Hallmark style
Yes.
card that we
The
think
book
of.
style.
which, gives you a little bit more writing space, which was, an issue. So even if you wanted to maybe send a little bit more to a certain individual, you really didn't have space. So now you don't have to write as much as a
So
letter.
you still felt it was poor taste that you were getting a.
Yes.
Now you can write a little bit more, so if Aunt Sally writes you a 2-page letter, at least now you can send back a card with a beautiful image and a little sentiment in it, and have room to tell her how everybody's been.
Correct. So it really, takes off from there, and those are gonna come out of Kansas City, so right in the heartland of America. And we actually are very fortunate that we do have a Christmas card collection here at the Historical Society. So the images you're seeing on your screen actually do come from our collection here.
And being a collections person,
Yes.
if any of you have any old vintage style cards, I'm sure we'd probably like to take some of those off your hands.
And probably my favorite one on this screen is I actually really like this Santa card. Not all of these are from the Victorian era, some are a little bit more at the turn of the century. But this Santa, the black background, is actually just what we scanned it on. So the card itself is the cutout of Santa's head. And then you're able to write on the inside and on the back. But you have with these ones also the children throwing snowball fights. And these are some more of the tamer kind of Victorian iconography.
Yeah, they had kind of an interesting sense of humor.
They did. There's a lot of frogs, and like one of my favorites is like I think it's a snowman eating a child. And a lot of dead birds. Like you just look at them and you're like, this is a Christmas card of something that is sweet and wholesome and supposed to invoke feelings of joyousness and together and community. And I'm seeing like Krampus eating a small child.
Right. But Victorians were also very obsessed with dead stuff too.
Yes.
But you have Audubon back then, all of his stuff was dead prints, and you have stuffed birds like pheasants and things.
Correct.
Which we actually have in this room. But there was a lot of that. So it wasn't out of the realm of something that it was normal.
It was very normal. And if you ever want to see any more of these cards, we do on our website right now, lombardhistory.org, have our Christmas cards virtual exhibit up there as well. So if we go through one too fast or you want to spend some more time looking at it, please visit our website and spend some time there.
And I see up there on the screen that we do have one that's very special to the hearts of Lombardians.
So I couldn't do a Christmas card without including our one of our Little Orphan Annie Christmas cards. So while she is not Victorian, this would have been from the 30s. Lombard is the home of Little Orphan Annie, and so I just wanted to highlight
the illustrator.
Yes, cartoonist.
Harold Gray.
It's from here, and so this is a Christmas card from him, his wife, and Annie and Sandy.
Now, the Little Orphan Annie house in Lombard, which is on Main Street.
Yes,
that's actually for his parents. Didn't he live over on Stewart or
Craig
or something?
Yes, he lived a few streets away.
Yeah, but that Little Orphan Annie house is very Victorian.
It was
looking,
and it kind of also lines into yes, it was a Christmas card, but it was also an advertisement for Little Orphan Annie, and he wasn't the first one to do it. So one of the cards we have in the collection is the one there on the right hand side. It is with the little girl who is ironing. She's actually using a Geneva hand fluter, and so this was an iron. And when I say iron, I mean these were made of iron. You drop it on your foot, you're gonna break a toe.
totally.
And these were used to put pleats into the dresses and petticoats, and it is from Geneva, Illinois, which is about 30-ish minutes from here. And so they would send out Christmas cards too, or let people use their imagery of getting ready for their fanciest best. And so Christmas cards, we do see the commercialism even back then, rooted into Christmas a little bit. And then the other one we have here, it's a little hard to see with this image, but this is showing the star shining down upon Bethlehem and the birth of
So a little bit more of a religious.
So
you can do advertising, you can do religious.
and truly the Christmas cards that we have in our collection run the gambit, as well as we have some more that are a little bit simpler in design. These are going to be some more of the ones that are more mass produced. And so there'll be fewer colors, or they'll just choose a select few And they'll be able to be printed and sold a little bit easier. And these ones are in the book style. So these are no longer postcards. So these are a little bit later in time in our collection.
And I'm sure, just like today, you can, how many men think you have to buy the biggest, bestest card to show how much you love?
Yes.
So you're gonna have some that are very simple like this and only use a few colors, but then there's some that have gilding on them. They're
Yes.
golden, just spectacular.
Those are going to be some more of those Louis Prang style, his original Christmas cards. Those are going to be, cut out and just covered in gilding and very intricate once you start getting to those. But this is not the only tradition that we get from the Victorian era. We also get stockings. So you can see behind me, we do have our stockings hung by the chimney with care.
Absolutely.
Yes. Now today, a lot of us do our stockings either on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. And it's a way that you have little, just smaller presents. This is not going to be your big Barbie dream house is not going to fit into a stocking these days. But you will get, small treats. I often get chocolates. And gift cards of mine or pens, which I really love.
And with our culture, we hang the stockings by the fireplace or on by the mantle. And there's some that hang them on their bedpost.
Really?
So it just depending on where you live, your traditions may be just slightly different. And back then, one of the biggest things was things like oranges and nuts.
Yes.
Because, we're so used to being able to go to the store and finding what we want all year round, but that wasn't the case.
No.
So to be able to get an orange
was very, do you know why the orange is so popular?
Why is the orange?
So it has to do with Saint Nicholas, the actual saint from Turkey, who Santa Claus is often based off of. And so that's why a lot of times we see certain cultures, or for the Victorians, they would do their stockings actually on December 6th, which is St. Nicholas Day. And so St. Nicholas was, as I said, he was from Turkey, who was an actual man. He was a bishop. And so he was known for helping out those in need.
Generosity.
Yes. And so he heard the plight of a widower, excuse me. This gentleman had 3 daughters, and he was bereft because he was not going to be able to provide a suitable dowry for any of his daughters, and was worried because of that they would not be able to find suitable husbands, and that he
Not
would
just that, they could end up being sold.
Yes, and that he was condemning them to a life on the streets or worse.
Yeah.
And he was concerned for his daughters, and Saint Nicholas heard about this gentleman's plight and how he was feeling. And so for some reason the people left their shoes on their windowsill. Or like right by their door.
I've smelled some shoes. It's probably
Probably, and so in the dead of night, Saint Nicholas came and left 3 golden balls, 1 in each of the shoes. And obviously, if any of us were to receive a solid gold ball, that we would have many of our financial woes. Have like a really nice cushion around us. And this is the same for this family back in Turkey hundreds of years ago. And so suddenly they were able to, see a better life for themselves. And to honor that, that's why we have oranges. Exactly.
Awesome.
So we had a woman come through on a tour not too long ago who, when I shared that story with her, she's like, I got oranges growing up and I had no idea why they were always in the toe of my stocking. But it's very sweet.
One of those things too, is that so many of our traditions we just do without knowing the backstory and where they came from. And that's why this is kind of fun, because then we can investigate, find out.
I almost forgot to do that.
Yeah.
Take some garbage out.
Now, we know the Victorians did do stockings as well. Now their stocking looked slightly different in that they were more like hose, and so they were actual stockings that they would put their feet into, versus how we very generously buy stockings today. But we know that they were doing that specifically because of a very well-known poem by a poet with the last name Moore. "'Twas the night before Christmas."
And all through the house.
Do you know what year that was written?
I don't remember.
It was written in 1822. So well before the Victorian era. So it was very much so in kind of the culture at the time.
Way before the Coca-Cola Santa.
Way before the Coca-Cola Santa. So when we look at the Victorian Santa, who we have an image of a pseudo Victorian Santa, he's got a little bit of the kind of portly to him. But Victorian Santas were very svelte, actually. They were very skinny, had very long robes. So it's not really until the 50s when we see the jolly old Saint Nick
With a bowl full of jelly.
Yeah, so he definitely has a bowl full of jelly in that poem, but they don't quite latch on to that until a little bit later.
Yeah, he's not quite as jelly as the other ones.
Correct. And so it's really the 19th century, these Victorian era, is when we see the rise of stockings truly become very popular. But now we are going to get into some of the traditions of tea itself. So for those of you who have joined us before, we've talked a little bit about Victorian traditions of tea. And for those of you who haven't joined us before, we want to make sure that you understand where tea comes from. So when we talk a little bit about it in regards to Christmas tea, we're all on the same page. Now, the people who lived in this home, the Hills, they lived here the longest, they were from England. And so it is very likely that in this room, afternoon tea was served.
Most definitely, I would think.
Exactly. And afternoon tea looks very different than Christmas tea. Now, Christmas tea is going to be a high tea versus afternoon tea was probably a low tea.
A high and a low. Now, we always think of a high tea as being a lot more extravagant, but that's not actually what it means.
No, so it is referring to the height of your table. So we are having a high tea right now because we are sitting at our dining room table here, instead of sitting on a couch with like a coffee table in front of us.
And I was thinking about how we call that the coffee table, and I'm wondering how many people actually use it for coffee. But that lower table that we usually think of in front of our sofas, the coffee table, would have been the right height for a low tea.
Exactly. And so we see, especially with England, we still see, with low teas, they would have some of the sweets like we do today, but they probably would have had more like a sweet. Versus the high tea is really going to be also known as like a meat tea or a meal tea, because they're going to have a full kind of meal, because it was a way to stop over between lunch and supper.
Because there was a kind of a big gap in between those. And if you were feeling a little peckish, you just need a little extra something to be able to make it to supper.
Yes, because supper was served at 8 p.m., but lunch was still served at noon. So 8 hours for most people is a little bit too long to go without eating. And so Queen Victoria saw one of her ladies in waiting, having a piece of cake in the afternoon, and decided that she wanted a piece of cake in the afternoon.
Great idea.
So that's where we get a lot of our traditions for tea itself. And now once we bring it over to kind of the United States, when we have places like the Walnut Room, we kind of muddle a little bit what high tea is, at least in the traditional British English sense. How dare us Americans, with throwing our tea.
I know sometimes when we've gone to other museums and things, a lot of times you'll see a chair that will have a small table that is a little bit higher. And so it would be the perfect thing to have your little teapot and
exactly
snacks on it. It was just great, but they're cute.
They're very cute. I do want to point out on the table kind of in front of me, the dark block there, that is a block of tea.
Bring it a little closer for you to see.
And so this would be what would have been shipped over originally from places like China, from the UK. And so it is all tea. It is just very, very compressed. And so when you were looking to make a cup, you would break off one of the sections that kind of perforated on the
Yeah.
back.
It is a brick of tea.
Yes, this is probably about 5 pounds, I would say.
I think it could probably knock somebody out.
Yes, and so that's where we see kind of the traditions of tea coming through. And so I just wanted to point that out as we got into Christmas tea. Now, especially when we talk about the Victorians, opulence of a Christmas feast.
Victorians, I always think more is more.
Yes, it is. You off to our left, we have one of our Christmas trees. And it is just a tabletop tree, and there's an entire package of tinsel on it because
More is more.
more is more. And so we really see that carried over into kind of the Christmas teas and the Christmas foods of this time. And so Christmas tea would have been that meat tea, that high tea. So you are having a meal with this. And it's a lot of menu planning, just like we do today. So I don't know if you started planning your holiday meal.
In my head, but I have not written it down yet.
I will say I have I have the shopping list and know what I will be having. I've already done that for the Christmas cookies
You
though,
know,
so.
and we still are very fortunate and that
Yes.
things are very available to
Mhm.
us, but back then, you would have to start planning this really far in advance just to make sure that you can get the supplies to be able to make this meal.
Correct, and a lot of, there would be brandy punches and, all sorts of nuts and dates and vegetables.
Pies.
Yes. So one of my favorite things, the Victorians really liked things covered in brandy. And so they have recipes from as far back as the 1860s for a hot brandy and rum punch. So it would have been dark rum, cognac or brandy, a pound of sugar cubes in there. So this is a large recipe. 4 lemons, 4 quarts of boiling water, and nutmeg. And so what you would do is you would rub the sugar over the lemons, and then put the sugar in the punch bowl, and then just throw everything else in there and mix until it was ready to serve.
Wow.
So they were not doing anything by half.
No, I imagine they probably have places for their guests to sleep after drinking.
Probably, I would think that, or you're hoping that your guests are not driving too far, or.
So there is one thing that our family still does that is very Christmassy, and we do make a steamed pudding every year.
Oh.
And the recipe for the steamed pudding, the pudding itself is really not that flavorful. I mean, it tastes kind of weird, but you have to add the sauce.
Yes.
We will put brandy on it, let it soak in, light it on fire. But then it's the sauce that
The
goes
sauce.
on top of it. Oh my gosh.
I say,
It just makes it so much better.
that sounds delicious.
I would make some. For you.
But we also, we see a lot of the same traditional kind of foods on our tables today. We're on the tables back then. So you have your turkey, your ham, your cuts of beef, mashed potatoes. You see lots of root vegetables. So carrots, parsnips, Brussels sprouts, so if you were to sit down at a Victorian table, it is very likely you would find something there that you would want to eat.
Because a lot of the stuff was, you could keep it through the winter in a room.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so it made it through, so you would bring it out.
There would also be things that were less familiar and things that have fallen out of fashion. Goose, we tend not to see on our tables anymore.
That's true.
They especially the Canadian geese around here are protected species nowadays, and so you're not going out into the forest and taking a goose for your table and or going down to the local butcher and getting some.
But that still is one of my favorite scenes at the end of A Christmas Carol.
Yes.
Go get that goose that's bigger than you.
Yes, the fatted goose.
Yeah.
We also see that there is turtle soup or mock turtle soup.
Mock. I'm a big turtle fan.
Yes, well, so we have a picture of a mock turtle on the screen. So this is Alice in Wonderland is my favorite book. And so I included the image from the original 10 drawings of Alice and the Griffin listening to the mock turtle cry about an unrelated story, but the image is actually very clever. You know, we think of Alice in Wonderland being nonsense, but it's quite clever if you know the Victorian era. Because if you look closely at the turtle, you'll notice he has his front flippers, but he has hooves and a tail, and he has the head of a cow, which is clever because mock turtle is the head of a calf. So you would use the cheeks, the brains, and that would be what you would use to make turtle soup. So having this kind of image, he is a mock turtle.
He is a mock turtle.
I will say that having read some of the recipes for it, it would not be my favorite soup, I would say.
No, I don't think so either.
They also would have had oyster soup or, heaven forbid, mock oyster soup. So
that sounds a little scary.
If anyone who is very interested in cooking, I highly recommend falling down kind of those rabbit holes of, of Victorian recipes, because you find some that are just so fascinating. Some of which, like our brandy punch, would be delicious. Some of which being, mock oyster soup, which I believe had like rabbit in it too.
Okay.
Either rabbit or mushrooms, I'm forgetting, or maybe both. It's very fascinating. And so we really do see how some of the things are cyclical. But we also have a swan on this slide, because swans were on a very important table, the table of Queen Victoria herself.
Oh, wow.
So this, and I'll show a close-up of it in the next slide, but this is the actual menu of Queen Victoria from 1846, I believe, of what she would have been eating on Christmas Day, or excuse me, 1896. And so she did not do anything by half. So you talked about making a pudding, and I'm assuming that you make probably one or maybe two puddings for
Just one.
just one. Windsor, which is where the Queen had her Christmas celebrations, they made 200.
Oh my goodness.
So I can make maybe 200 cookies, and that would be an undertaking,
Right.
like 200 chocolate chip
Oh
cookies.
my goodness.
Oh,
That's a lot of
200
pudding.
steamed puddings. And they are not, and yes.
Well, the thing is, you would have to make it, but you wouldn't serve it that same day. You would have to make it and store it, make it and store it until you got enough of them, I would think.
Yeah, so they also, and keep in mind, the Queen had many properties, and she owned many in the area. And so they would make them in other places, and then they would be delivered to Windsor. So it wasn't just, thankfully, just the one kitchen
Right.
making 200 puddings. But this is an undertaking, because they would boil them for 12 hours.
I wonder if they used hard sauce on theirs.
I'm not sure. We're looking at a closer look at. Oh, that was the wrong. There we go. So this is a little bit closer look. Of course, being the Queen, she did put her menu in French. And so some of the kind of translations would be, she would have soups, and she would have la tête de veau en torte. And so head of veal and tortoise soup. She did have that on her table. So she was eating mock turtle along with real turtle, because she was fancy enough. And then they would have 3 root vegetable soup as well. So you get, a meat soup and a lighter vegetable soup. As well as they have poissons or fish. And so they would have boiled turbot with hollandaise sauce, along with fried fillets of sole.
A lot of fish.
A lot of,
And I always think of Italian as having a lot of fish on
Yeah.
Christmas Eve.
I say, but
There's others that have a lot of fish.
she did have some fish as well. But then she starts getting into roasted turkey with sausages.
Okay.
She also has a leg of pork roast, a sirloin of beef, and then plum pudding as well. So she has a very heavy table.
Right.
It is not, this is not a light meal. This is not your light summer meal. This is to get you through the winter months.
I wonder how long it would take you to eat them.
Yeah, I'm
I know.
not
We're
sure.
at the table, we scarf it down and we're gone, and you'd have to stay there quite a while to be able to eat that much.
You would, and keep in mind, Victoria, she was having this was her late supper, so she started dinner at 9 p.m.
Wow.
So you're eating this food at 9 p.m. I don't know about you, but especially in the winter when the sun is setting at like 4 o'clock.
How many of us go, oh, what time is it? It's gotta be at least 11 at night. Oh, it's only 7?
Great. Yes, so I can't imagine how people were able to stay awake, because of course they were probably also having, some of the brandy punches and such
Obviously.
things.
A little bit of this and a little bit
Yes.
of that.
And that's not even the entire menu. She also had asparagus and a mousseline sauce. They had mince pies, which at this time, mince is going to be, they would have had meats in their mince.
It's like meats and fruits. It's like
Yeah.
raisiny kind of.
Yes, and it's like a ground beef with, you would see nuts and spices and like raisins and plums.
And you would think, oh, that sounds weird, but how many people have had those meatballs that have been made with grape jelly? And they're
Yeah.
good.
So it's that savory
yeah.
kind of balance with it.
Savory sweet.
And then they had, perhaps a rice pudding as well. And then they also have on the side table,
More.
they would have had, they would have had a poultry pie, they would have had a game pie, they would have had the wild boar's head, which was tradition, from the medieval era to have, and I don't know how much of that they actually ate and how much of the wild boar's head was more centerpiece, yes. But
Because even sometimes with like goose or they would have some of the feathers on it. It would like look
it would,
like the animal.
I have seen it where they still have like the head and neck still attached, or and it's
a little morbid.
a little bit, yes. And as I said, this is all, you're eating all of this at 9, starting to eat all of this at 9 p.m. And it's coming out in the courses and everything, and so hopefully you took a nap that afternoon.
Truly.
Then every great meal ends with your just desserts.
Of course.
Now, one of my favorite kind of sweets at this time of year is actually the candy cane. Like, I do like a little bit of the peppermint stick once in a while, especially if it is that kind of old fashioned stick that doesn't have the hook on it yet.
That's right, because they didn't start off with them.
No, they started off as a just a straight peppermint stick.
And didn't even have stripes. It
No,
was just white.
and they say that the kind of the originator of this, the kind of hook, would have been in Cologne, Germany. In around like 1670, they were having a crash, which is also a living crash or a living nativity. And they had children participating. And children just in living nativities are darling, because one of them inevitably like either will start to cry because they see the lights, goes the wrong way, says the wrong thing, and it makes it even more wholesome than if it had been like a
Perfect.
huge production
Right.
and perfect.
Right.
But one of the priests there really wanted to make sure that the children behaved. And so he bribed them with peppermint sticks, and he put the hook in it to be
Like the shepherds.
exactly.
Yeah, so it was more like the shepherd. So I know a lot of times people you can take something that's been around and you can assign different meanings
Yes.
to it. So I know later on, some people, the Christians, they would add extra little meaning to
Yes.
parts of it that wasn't the original intention.
Correct. And we see in the 1900s, they like the image that we have here, they're used as decoration. I mean, you have that hook, you stick it on a tree. I would not recommend eating a peppermint that has been on a tree, especially
Unless it's a wrap.
yes. But
Yeah.
they did not have cellophane back in the 1900s.
No, that would probably, help to make it smell a little.
It probably did.
Because I've had the peppermint, but they're also using lights that were real candles, the flame.
Yes.
So it was creating heat, which would, with the peppermint, probably make the smell go throughout the house.
It probably would smell very
Yeah.
nice. But it's not going to be until 1900 that we do see that kind of iconic red stripe. So if you look at certain Christmas cards from pre-1900 and you see them like with the candy canes like on the trees, or holding candy canes or even peppermint sticks, they're pure white at this point. So it's very interesting, we think that the peppermint stick, the candy cane has always been this way. But it really has gone through an evolution through the years. Now, we also have gingerbread.
Mhm.
Now, do you make a gingerbread house?
No.
It's a lot of work, especially.
Kids, I've done gingerbread men,
Mhm.
but I have never done the house. And I have to admit, a lot of gingerbread I'm not too really keen on because it can get kind of hard. And I like a softer cookie, but you can't build with a softer cookie.
Correct. And it was really important to have something structurally sound that you could build out of because gingerbread was the showstopper. So when gingerbread was first created, it was meant to be the cookie for royalty. It wasn't even made in homes, it was made by Bakers Guild. Because think about, spices, how expensive those would be and how, cardamom, ginger, those were not things that were easily
Not
accessible.
everybody's covered.
And not in everyone's price point back in the 15th century. And so it was really meant to be just for royalty and just something that they were able to enjoy.
I do like seeing them unveil the gingerbread house in
Yes.
the White House every year.
It is very silly and very cute.
It is. It's amazing how big they can be
Yeah.
and how much they can weigh.
Mhm.
That'd be terrifying to move.
And yes, and so that's why they were the centerpieces, the showstoppers. And it's actually though not going to be until 1854 that we see gingerbread coming to the United States. And it's going to be brought over by Swiss Catholic monks.
Really?
Yes. Do you know what state they brought it to?
I have no idea.
Indiana.
Oh,
They
just over the border.
Just over the border. They set up a monastery there and they were using it. By this point, you were making gingerbread in the home. And it had been connected to the holidays. And so they were selling gingerbread as a way to raise money to give food and clothing to the poor in the community.
That's pretty cool.
Isn't it? So it would not have been, the opulence of a gingerbread showcase.
And it's
but-
gonna be a whole lot easier buying it from them than making it yourself.
Correct. Yes.
I
I
have a confession.
you have a confession.
I like fruitcake. Speaking of monks, they do that too.
They do. I say, yeah, if you, there's quite a number of monasteries and abbeys that have bakeries attached to them as a way to raise
Fundraise.
funds. And it is just, their food is always.
So
very
if
good.
anybody got a fruitcake you don't want, you can send it here and I'll eat it.
But kind of with that, we think of fruitcakes. I don't know. I always think to fruitcakes of having those really artificial, like neon green
The green and the red
green.
jelly fruits.
And
Yeah.
those are okay, in my opinion. I do like though, like the very traditional, like where it's, the raisins and they're not artificially flavored. Which is very similar to what a sugar plum would be. So we actually have sugar plums here, and that's what a
Ching, ching.
cheers is stacked in the one little photo. And so
That's good.
it's delicious. And I didn't realize until I started, writing Christmas tours that sugar plums are not plums covered in sugar.
Isn't it a dancer and a nutcracker?
There is
It's a fairy.
it is a fairy. There is the sugar plum fairy as well. And while there may be plums in it, it's actually the mix of like nuts and dried fruits with a little bit of honey or manuka sugar, all kind of like rolled up together. Ours has almonds in it.
These are very good. Now, where did you find them?
I am so fortunate that I have incredible volunteers and he made these for us. And so they are Alton Brown's recipe for anyone who wants to make them themselves.
Very good.
But it refers to the, this mixture being rolled up to the size of a plum. So that is which ours are a little bit smaller
But you know
than
what? The
plum
plums-
size.
But the plums that we get in the store are much larger than the
Very
traditional
true.
plums.
So it refers to just kind of, palm size and then rolled in sugar. So that's why they're called sugar plums.
It's kind of like a large marble.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very
So
good.
especially, these ones are also, they've got a savory element to them too. They've got cardamom and fennel and star anise in them. So which are all very traditional Victorian spices. So a lot of the, sweets, and they would have had, very heavily sugared. They did have like, you think your Queen Victorian sponges and cakes, but those would be a lot more of your summer dessert. So especially during the winter, they want
My Christmas meter, just eating that.
they want the darker, heavier spices to, be those kind of warming spices, because we're very fortunate. Even being in a Victorian home today, there is central heating, which I'm very grateful for. But these homes would not have had that in the past. So a lot of times you're putting on the layers, you're staying really close to the fire, and you get that in kind of internal warming effect from your tea and your warming spices and your rum. Absolutely, you would get it from your rum, to be very clear. And then last but not least, we touched on this a little bit earlier, you do have your figgy pudding, also known as kind of your Christmas pudding. So that is what is the photo that has the sprig of holly coming out of it. And you can see that, yes, that one is a photo of one on fire.
Yeah.
And so this, when we talk about
brandy.
yes. And so when we refer to pudding in like the British vernacular, it is very different than the American vernacular.
It's not snack pack.
No, it is not. You don't need a spoon to eat this, or well, you do, but you're not.
But when we
Yes.
think of like bread pudding,
Yes.
it has a firmer texture,
Mhm.
but yet it still kind of like melts in your mouth a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not as liquidy as like pudding
Correct.
we think of today. So
Yes,
it's still technically a pudding.
it is. And so this is even farther back than Victorian. It has its roots in kind of the medieval era, as well as, combining, it would have suet in traditional breadcrumbs, flour, eggs, spices. Early recipes were made with milk or fortified wine. So these are really things that were accessible to everyone, especially suet. And it was just a way to have something a little bit extra special.
Suet doesn't really sound appealing, but it was a way of binding everything.
Yes, absolutely. It was,
Think of it, it was an early Crisco.
yes, exactly. That is a perfect way to describe it. And so these would, they are boiled. As I said before, Queen Victoria's puddings were boiled for 12 hours to make them, which feels very excessive.
Yeah.
I don't know if it quite needs that much time, but it is a very labor intensive process. If you're following like the traditional recipe, you're supposed to let it sit for at least a day before serving it. It does have a long boil time. You make it in a cheesecloth. And I know one of my friends who lives in Britain, she's like, yeah, people do still have pudding bowls that you can buy.
I have one in my house.
I love that. I say, you mentioned the sauce that you pour over top of it. I would love to hear more about that.
Hard sauce,
Yes.
butter, cream, and booze. Lots of butter and lots of cream and that little bit of brandy or rum, and it just makes everything lots of sugar in it too. Yeah, butter.
So a health
Yeah.
food.
Oh, butter, cream, sugar, and
Mhm.
the brandy or the rum, and it is just fabulous.
That's
But to pour it, because
Mhm.
if the cake itself was sweet,
Mhm.
it would be too much.
Yes.
So, but that's why the cake by itself needs that, because
Mhm.
you're not putting all that sugar into the cake, so you need to have it externally put on it to make it
Yeah.
edible.
Do you put any sort of like, what do you put into your puddings? I know I was doing some of like looking at all of these,
We
like,
do like cranberry,
okay,
so it has that little tart berry in it,
Oh.
but it's gonna be a darker
Yeah.
cake, molassesy, and
Mhm.
but it's very, I love it. It just makes the Christmas
The
season.
Christmas season.
Mhm.
I love that. I say, well, that does unfortunately bring us to the end, kind of our meal and our time and our tea together.
You know what I would really like to know?
Yeah,
I would like to know if any of our viewers here, what are some of the foods that you traditionally,
Mhm.
need to have at your table to make it Christmas?
Yeah, I say we are, you can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to speak aloud. Otherwise, I do have a magic box that's showing me the chat here at the table. But yeah, or if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about, or questions about Victorian Christmas, this is only the beginning of the Victorian traditions that we have.
Well, I think we're gonna have to get that recipe for the
Yes.
sugar plums and put that somewhere for everybody, because I am just blown away at how wonderful those taste.
They are delicious, in my opinion. I'm very happy. When my volunteer, his name is Bill, he said he was bringing them in and I said, absolutely, please.
Bill didn't make it enough.
He wanted to take some home to his family, so he snagged enough for us.
It's
So-
good, it's good.
I say, if anyone has any questions or anything that they want to share, we have always loved doing these because they feel like you're sitting here right here with us.
And you know, just for, you know, people who are watching too, if you have not had a chance to come into the Victorian Cottage to see how it's decorated right now, it is so beautiful. And will there be other opportunities?
There will. So we are offering tours of the house on the 23rd and 24th of December. And so those are going to be on the 23rd, we'll have a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock tour. And then on Christmas Eve, we bump those up a little bit so that way I can get home reasonably on Christmas Eve. A noon, 1 and 2 o'clock tour. And as Kim said, this is a very small snapshot of how we have it decorated. It's really the Victorian more is more is more is more. So I say, well, if there are, move that, there it goes, move that along. Let's see, Jessica says that they would have fresh eels swimming in their bathtub until Christmas Eve because they're Italian.
Oh my goodness.
And so they would be breaded and fried, and then they would celebrate the Feast of the Seven Fishes on Christmas Eve as well, with fresh clams and ginger and calamari, and then gingerbread with fresh ginger. So
swimming in the bathtub.
that is, I say
I love it.
my Christmas Eve, we try and have as many fishes as possible as well, because I'm also Italian. And I think we do get up to 7 between like the couple different types of salmon, both fresh and smoked, that we
Is
do.
there a reason for 7?
There is, and I don't remember what it is. I'm being a very bad Italian.
Do you remember what the 7?
It might be the 7 C's, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'm being a very bad American Italian and not knowing traditionally. But that is very fun, and I can see how it would.
Where do you even get live eels around here? I guess over at the maybe Supreme Lobsters.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but that would be. I love that imagery, especially if someone walks in who was not expecting it. That makes me giggle.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Well, I do want to say thank you to all of you for joining us. We're so glad that you were able to come and spend, some time in the afternoon with us. We will be doing these again. Our next virtual tea will be in March, and we're going to talk about Victorian fashion for that one.
Oh, we have a volunteer who just is amazing seamstress and has made so many beautiful outfits for herself.
Yes.
And she's made a couple for some of our volunteers and staff here, and they're just jaw-dropping.
That will be in March, and so make sure to visit lombardhistory.org for all of our upcoming events and more, as well as we will be in the summer, we will be doing an in-person garden party. So similar, but
so start planning your hats, ladies.
Yes. So hopefully we will see you all again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope that you have the happiest of holidays.
Very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Take care.